Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. Today we're talking about drugs in the Black community. I'm doing research on that for a project that I'm completing, um, and we all knew that drugs were put in the Black community by foreigners. The reason why we knew that is Dr. Chancellor Williams taught us about it, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. So, did immigrants bring drugs to the Black neighborhoods, and did they bring filth to Black music? Um, let's start with drugs. Dr. Chancellor Williams taught us in the 80s that the Italians brought drugs into the Black community in the 70s. Um, According to Dr. Williams, they brought crack cocaine and heroin to the Black neighborhoods. But there's something I want y'all to get y'all to look at that's very important. What I've identified since I've been on Spaces, um, I've learned along with y'all, is that immigration, and I've said this 100 times, I'll say it 10,000 more times. Immigration is a tool of war created by Captain James Oglethorpe um, of England. If y'all remember during the 13 colonies, the escaped enslaved blacks would run away from the plantations and bump into the Indians, which were black. They were black. Get the fuck out of here. I did a training with the Marine Corps, and they had the War of 1812, a big early photograph up on the wall in the museum, Marine Corps Museum at Paris Island, of the War of 1812, like one of the first photographs ever of them rounding up the quote unquote Indians, and they all look like us. Um, anyway, long story short, um, the enslaved Africans would run away from the plantations and keep running until they ran into an Indian. I almost gag when I say the word Indian um, plantation or stronghold, and the air quote Indians would marry these blacks and have children with them. The old saying being true: find a friend, find an enemy of my enemy, and I found a friend. They would do counterattacks on the white colonists, the English colonists, and they were beating the living shit out of the Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson slave owner class. Thomas Jefferson wrote home to Mama. Not Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin. I'm sorry. Wrote home to the Queen, and the Queen hired her best tactician, James Oglethorpe, captain in Her Majesty's Royal Service, and their words, not mine. And Captain Oglethorpe came up with a filthy idea, but a brilliant one. Captain Oglethorpe said, "You know what, Your Majesty? We can kill two birds with one stone. We can get rid of our undesirable pedophiles and debtors, criminals. We can get them out of England, and we can send them to America, to the 13 colonies, to protect the white ownership class, the nobles, the nobility." So they sent filthy um, debtors, insane lunatics, criminals, and pedophiles to America to protect the white ownership class, and that's where the state of Georgia was begun, the Georgia Corporation. Now I'm in Georgia now, and I'm not going to be ugly, but when you know let's put it this way, according to Professor James Smalls, the history erases the mystery, right? Well, anyway, uh, that tactic, the system of white supremacy is a one-trick pony, and it keeps renewing that tactic of using immigration as a tool of war. 100 years later, 150 years later, the system of white supremacy would use that tactic again to send the Irish at blacks. Once we were emancipated, we were starting to shoot up like a rocket. Once we got our quote unquote freedom, we started doing too well. So they sent Irish at us to fuck us up. The Irish um, became members of the Klan. They became the slave patrols and the police, and they start messing us up. The Irish, under the direction of Woodrow Wilson, triggered the Great Migration. Okay, fast forward again. They sent the Europeans. They sent the Jews and the Jewish members of Europe and the Germanic people, immigrants, to compete with us. Fast forward another 50 years, they start to send melanated immigrants. They sent the Hispanics and the Caribbeans and the Africans. The latest group to be sent as weapons of intellectual warfare towards our communities is the Eastern Indians. To my assessment, that's the latest group of immigrants that's been sent diametrically opposed to Black Americans. Now let's rewind back to the Irish. When the Irish were sent, the group that was sent right after them were the Italians. Now this is very important, so I want y'all to listen to this. Uh, the Irish were allowed to join the police force. So the Irish made up the police force in diametric opposition to blacks, to native, to foundational Black Americans, or what Dr. Claude Anderson calls native blacks. Well, the Italians were used for the illegal side of that same hand, and they formed the mafia, which the government. There's a lot of evidence to support that the government just let them do what they do, right? Um, well, in the 70s, the Black neighborhoods had a lot of cohesion. We were doing too well. Pre 70s, our marriage rates were 80%. Ownership was up. We didn't have all these degrees and shit, but we had money, we had food, we had family, we had everything we needed. The longer I stay in education, the longer I think it's just a sham, really. But back to the point at hand, according to Dr. Chancellor Williams, the Italians intentionally introduced drugs into the Black communities to destroy our cohesion. If you look at crack cocaine was designed in a fucking lab. Our dear sister Tasharzad Ali said that for the first time in history, crack cocaine destroyed the bond between the mama and the cub, and she was right. It's my opinion that crack cocaine was created in that lab to bind to those receptors in your brain to make you fall in love with it and fall out of love with family. And if my hypothesis is correct, the system of white supremacy triumphed with crack, because for the first time in history, those Italians introducing crack cocaine in the Black neighborhood separated the mother from child and created absolute pandemonium and discord in the Black neighborhoods. I grew up in these neighborhoods in the 90s. I saw the tail end of this epidemic, and it was nothing. It was a hard thing to see. Wani, did immigrants bring drugs to Black neighborhoods? What do you think?
Yes, apparently the mafia was heavily involved in bringing drugs into our communities. And of course, the multiple Caribbean gangs, um, Dominicans, Haitians, and Jamaicans are very much part of bringing drugs in. And again, they're more dangerous to us because we view them as extensions of ourselves. And we don't expect them to do a lot of things that have been extremely harmful, things that we would not allow a white person to get away with that type of level of access to us. We would be more suspicious. But when it's presented as, hey, you want a party? And then you use it one time and end up spiraling into hell,
Hello.
which is the way that it's described. It's described as you really just have to use it one time. And then you just keep chasing it, and you never quite catch it. It catches you. So, that being said, that's deliberate. They know what it is. They've been playing around with cocaine for years. The people that created it, Germans. Again, do we
Oh
need to say
my.
they isolated it? And yeah,
I didn't
and then
even
that's
know
why,
that.
yeah,
Wow.
and that's why Freud was running around writing books about how great cocaine was and trying to get everyone to use it until he got caught up
Sure
and,
was.
and wrote a whole
I
book
didn't even make that connection. You're right.
called
Wow.
On Coca. On Coca is the is the name of the book. Anyway, after he became a coke fiend and tried to convince everyone around him that it was the end all be all, he finally backed up off of it. But they knew what it was about way back in his time. So, of course, they knew what it was about in the 80s. So, it's deliberate. And it does break the family bond. And it's also done something else that I noticed. It makes people accept bad behavior far more than they did before. So now people can do things against you over and over and over and over again. And it's just acceptable because, hey, we're used to putting up with all this bad behavior and blaming it on mental illness and drugs and whatever. And so now people can just tear their natural ass and get away with it, and they don't get the punishment. I mean, we see it within the movement and we see it in real life. They can just do whatever they want, do the most egregious things, and they keep popping up. You see, just like fresh toast, they pop up again.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. A good point that Wani brought up. I didn't even realize that there was that connection between the here we go with the Germans again. But cocaine was heavily studied. Wani said a really important word that may have went over a lot of heads. She said isolate. So crack cocaine, um, I'm not a chemist, but I took chemistry. They use baking soda in the cocaine process. Baking soda isolates certain elements of materials. So, what crack cocaine did, as it was explained to me, is it binds to receptors in your brain, and it blocks your like signals, like a love signal. Dr. Chajarzad Ali said that made it really hard for a mother to keep a bond with her child. Like it basically interfered with that reception and said, I need my children. I love my children. I need to chill this shit out because my children need me. And it has that same calling that a child has to a mama. And it's my opinion that was done on purpose to break up our neighborhoods. Why? Because during the Nixon era, Richard Nixon in Henry Kissinger's diary, Richard Nixon has said Henry said that Richard Nixon said, Henry, stop them or they're going to jump over the fence and get us. Them was us. We didn't have food. We didn't have jobs. We didn't have them degrees and fraternities and stuff, but we had each other. And the black family being together was strong enough to march on Washington and just jump over the goddamn fence of the White House and charge on Richard Nixon, had him scared to death. So the three-letter agencies did work to try to figure out how to break us apart. And some scholars believe, including me, that the Italian mafia immigrants were used to introduce that to our neighborhood, and that's what we had it together, y'all. Drugs is what fucked us up. That crack cocaine fucked us up. I'm an 80s baby, and I remember that environment. I remember I went to class with crack babies. It fucked up the emotional stability of children. Last thing I'm gonna say, I'm gonna go to 7-4 and then the Sir Fun Q is crack cocaine binds. It has something to do. The research that I read, crack cocaine affects black people different because of our nervous system. Our nervous system is has a hyperconnectivity, maybe due to melanin, but I'm not a biologist, so I'm not gonna pretend like I understand it. But I know our nervous system is different. And crack cocaine affects our nervous system in a different way than it does whites. So crack cocaine was targeted towards us. 7-4, what's on your mind?
I
Hey,
was just
yeah,
gonna,
I
oh,
think Sir Funk was ahead of me. I'll wait my
Oh,
turn.
my bad, my
okay.
bad. We're gonna go to Wani right quick and then Surf
I
on.
was just gonna, I was just gonna say that there's no one person that created crack, but cocaine was definitely created by a German man, but they haven't pinpointed who, in fact, created crack cocaine.
Wow. Go ahead, Surf on Q.
What's going on, family? Peace to the room. Yeah, I'm I might be slightly older than you, Professor, but I grew up as a young adult. I moved from from Georgia State University. I graduated and moved on and moved to South Florida, and I was in Miami in the '80s and '90s, and um, uh, I saw what I saw was sort of like a split. I'm probably not going to be as articulate as either one of you in describing what I saw, but I saw a split world where, yeah, it was mostly Jamaicans and, of course, the mestizo Colombians who were running the drug trade to the poor neighborhoods. Um, and foundational Black Americans were uh, in the midst of an ethnic cleansing campaign, which started with the arrival of the Cubans. Um, and so that that was the to use an internet term, that was the killer app right there. That was the icing on the cake as far as uh, breaking down black families and getting us up out of Dayton Broward County. I remember because anybody and oh yeah, and by the way, I saw an interesting split in the way things were dealt with, because what you would see is, some white kid or some spicy white kid uh, would, make a fortune, and or his family would make a fortune in the cocaine trade, and that same behavior from a black kid, and especially a black American kid, immediately got you, a very long a very long prison sentence.
Hey,
Um,
could you stop right there? I want to interject on that shit. You hit a nerve, bro. Y'all heard what he
okay.
just said? He just said that there was a differentiation between the way that whites were treated with the drug trade. And one thing I want to bring up is Bill Maher, the comedian. I don't know what his title, pundit. Bill Maher brags on selling drugs while he was at Cornell. That's what he says. He said while he was at Ivy League Cornell University, he sold drugs to pay for his tuition. Now, when I was in college, I knew brothers who sold weed, and damn near every last one of them did jail time for selling weed. So why didn't Bill Maher go to jail for selling weed? It's just something to think about. Good point, Fun Q. Continue your point.
Exactly. That was, and in fact, that has been the entire pattern of whether it be whether it be alcohol or heroin or in this case cocaine. In fact, there's a couple of books out that I doggone it, I can't remember the title, and you guys are really good about books that talked about how it was it was the drug trade that allowed people to uh, uh, the immigrants and who the government looked the other way as they plied the drug trade. It allowed them to build fortunes to be able to develop the real estate and to branch off into other forms of, shall we say, legitimate business. And the story that you got when I was in the 80s and the 90s is that um, that was then, and it's just not that way anymore. And in the meantime, Miami was popping skyscrapers into the sky like mushrooms everywhere. So yeah, that Miami was the most recent American city that the drug trade built, and quite successfully, obviously, as long as you're not Black American. Now, also, one of the things that I experienced also when I moved down there, uh, I was working for a what was called a gray market car dealership, which is back in the 70s and 80s. If you wanted a Ferrari, you almost had to go to Europe to get it, or if you wanted a certain type of Porsche, you had to go to Europe to get it. And so these guys would import these cars, and this. I worked for this gentleman who uh, had a, he was basically a redneck white Catholic boy. He had he had his car dealerships and his construction company, all of this funded by his, his drug running. He also had a fleet of about, uh, he had a fleet of about half a dozen cigarette boats. Um, there was a, the joke that goes around about auto racing and boat racing is that uh, none of those sports could have happened without the drug trade. And that includes NASCAR, because that's what the rich guys, or that's what people making their fortunes did with their money. They would, race on the weekends, whether it be a fast boat or a fast car. And those are the origins of NASCAR and everything else. But um, when I started going to work for his, when I started going to work in his dealership, um, uh, I would be, every now and then I'd have to do like an oil change or a valve adjustment, and then take a Ferrari or a Lamborghini down to Miami um, to various customers who had just purchased, these cars. So um, if you look on Miami Beach's map, there's this road that connects a lot of the islands where people live, like Star Island and Palm Island and Hibiscus Islands. It's called North Bay Road, and it was the place where the the elite of the drug trade had their homes when they were here in America. And I think if you look it up, I think it's 5640 North Bay Road. So that was Pablo Escobar's home in Miami. And I a couple of times I delivered Ferraris not to him personally, but to his neighbor. I forget the guy's last name, but I was doing I would do a valve adjustment on a Testarossa, and I'd end up taking it down there to his place, and it looked just like anything you would see on Miami Vice. Two big Samoan dudes with Uzis standing at the gate. They wave you in. You deliver the car, and then you take whatever car he needs servicing back to the dealership. He offered me a job at 50,000 bucks a trip to take one of his cigarette boats out to an island in the Bahamas. There's thousands of little islands in the Bahamas. Um, um, he wanted me to, he wanted me to bring back the bricks. Um, Um, I politely declined because I'm a bit of a square. I'll tell you this. I've never I have I haven't even so much as had a beer in my life. Never mind a line of Coke. But I was around these people because in South Florida that's all you ever saw, and that's all you ever everybody down there has some sort of connection to it. But um, I declined the invitation and because even then I understood that every now and then if you're running drugs out of the Caribbean, you have to do a you have to give what's called a sacrifice load to the feds to make it look like they're doing something. Um, and of course, who else would they sacrifice besides some dumb black kid who thinks he's like doing something really cool? So um, I saw so many different scenarios involving, like I say, the economics of drugs and the way that it affected white and buffer class people who were allowed to do it, as opposed to what happened when black kids tried to do the same thing. And um, I guess, yeah, I'll stop it there. I appreciate I appreciate you guys. I listen to you every night, and it fills in the way that you guys fill in my life experience with your scholarship is has been immeasurable, and I really appreciate what you guys do.
Oh, you're more
Take care.
you're more than welcome, brother. Thank you for bringing that up. And notice that he was talking about Miami. That's Immigrant Central. That was a main vector for drugs coming from immigrants, right? As a vector of attack again. I mean, this shit gets deep as fuck, y'all. Like, I was watching a documentary talking about Oliver North, Ollie North, Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Marine Corps. Like, that shit was linked up with like black ops and shit. Like, they were using, allegedly, using the crack cocaine money to fund clandestine operations in the military, for Christ's sake. I mean, Ricky Ross kind of talked about that a bit. The way it works with the military is Congress has to pay for it. So, and I teach this stuff, to know a little bit about it. But so the president is the executive branch. He has the ability to declare war, but Congress has to pay for it. So President whoever can say, "I declare war against Cuba." I'm just saying. Well, if Congress don't want to pay for it, there ain't no bombs gonna get dropped because you got to. That's a line item. It has to be paid for. So it was told to me that the way that they were fighting these little black ops wars that were Congress didn't know about was with the drug money. So the drug trade, you had our brothers and sisters on the street selling dope ultimately to pay for bombs that were dropped on a war that Congress didn't pay for. This shit is a hot goddamn mess, y'all. It's a hot mess. Go ahead, Seven, and then we'll go to Cheryl.
I was going to
Go
say
ahead,
something
Wani.
real quick. No, I just wanted to say I was watching a documentary and this guy was, he had been caught with DNA tests years after. And he said, I was on crack cocaine. He killed a girl. He said, oh, yeah, I was on crack cocaine back then. I did all kinds of crimes. And at the end of the documentary, they mentioned that Black people are associated with using cocaine. But in fact, white people use crack cocaine more than Black Americans. And they And then we just got stigmatized again because the statistics show that they used crack and powder cocaine. And uh, and they just, like out here, they made crime legal. You can steal up to 900 and some dollars because white people kept shoplifting. White people were on drugs. So they go into the store with their pillowcase, collect up all the things that they want, and they use that money that from the things that they stole to buy more drugs. So they just basically have legalized theft, and they've legalized, this circular thing, stealing things from the store and using it to buy drugs. So that's how they're dealing with white boys now. It's a two-tiered justice system, possibly three or four tiers, if I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, it's part of a master plan, and once you lay it out, it's not hard to see. You know, I want to say before we move to seven that the word conspiracy itself was created in a think tank of a three letter agency, and it was brilliant. Create a word to identify what's actually happened, and then ostracize the word. So if A plus B plus C equals ABC, then that just is what the fuck it is. You know what I'm saying? But no, it's a conspiracy. No, it's
Well,
what's going on.
it's conspiracy theory,
Hmm.
but when you say conspiracy, it immediately gets dismissed. Conspiracies do happen.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But the moment you say it's a conspiracy, even though the term conspiracy theory was meant to disqualify everything that you were suspicious of, uh, even now the word conspiracy reeks of something that should not be believed. And that's sad because we've experienced conspiracies all the time.
Right. Right. No cap. 7-4. What's on your mind, bro?
Hey, good evening.
Hey.
So, do immigrants bring drugs to black neighborhoods? Yeah, they do. What's that Spice One say? From across the seas comes cocaine, but you never see a black man fly the plane.
Hello.
And uh, yeah, so yeah, white people they use drugs more than anybody. Take a look at Hunter Biden. He can't control himself. He done smoked so much crack, he done fucked up his whole mouth. And yeah, so we were talking about addiction, and we make it seem like these drugs have a chemical grip on our minds to where we we can't fight it. I don't believe that, and the reason why is because the best addiction study ever done was called Operation Golden Flow, and what happened was that uh, in Vietnam, you had a lot of GIs who were addicted to heroin, and this became an embarrassment for the United States government. So what they did was they started to do drug testing, urine analysis. That's why it was called Golden Flu. And what happened was, if you tested positive for drugs, you were not allowed to rotate out until you went through treatment and you tested negative. And they did follow up studies years later on the people who went through the program. And I want to say, I don't know the exact numbers, but they did, 5 year studies, 10 year studies. The overwhelming majority did not relapse. Like, I think I heard this number as low as 5% relapse. So the reason why addiction grips us is because just like those GIs, they were in an environment where they felt useless, they felt worthless, and it triggered them to use the drugs. And that's the reason why I think we know that we have an addiction problem, in our communities, is because because we've been socioeconomically disadvantaged. And I say that's why we need our reparations. Because we change our economic status. We don't want to use drugs. Black people, we already have some of the lowest addiction rates of any ethnic group. So with that, I yield the mic.
Yeah, that's a good point. Uh, but the drugs. have been linked. I don't know how to think about that. I hear what you're saying. I hear your data, but drugs are were linked to the destruction of our communities. My aunt June raised.
I'm not debating that.
Okay, maybe I re-identify your argument. I misunderstood you then.
Yeah, because they think that drugs have such a chemical grip on our minds that we can't kick the habit.
Mm.
That's what I was trying to kind of say. It's our conditions that we live in under white
Okay, yeah,
supremacy
I agree with
that
that.
make us that make us susceptible. So I think once we get our reparations, we change our conditions. You know, the addiction problems will
I
disappear.
totally agree with that, and I could prove that you're right with that. I misunderstood you. He's right. Conditions keep you or keep drug addicts in that on that Ferris wheel. And my evidence of that is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam had amazing results with getting brothers off hard drugs because they introduced them to a whole nother environment and a whole nother condition. That's all it is. You know what I'm saying? It's conditions. So
It is. That's why they say stay away from your friend group, your old friends that you were doing drugs with. That's one of the main things.
right, right. You're right. I heard you wrong, 7-4. You correct 100% correct with that.
Yeah, I did have it I thought out.
I'm not sure if it was Cheryl or Fresh. I'm gonna go with Cheryl and then we go to Fresh.
Yes, hi everybody.
Hey.
I, I, I was in my 20s in the 80s, and I live in Atlanta, but I grew up in Virginia. And I tell you, I have seen family members go down from crack cocaine. I had a cousin. Um, they would set them up. She had just a pipe, no drugs, but a pipe in her pocket. And when the cops carried her downtown, they gave her an option. They said, you can plead guilty, you'll just be on probation, or you can go to trial. So, of course, a lot of them pled guilty. So now she has, since she's gotten clean years ago, but she has a nursing degree, but nobody will hire her because of her record. She's working at Family Dollar and a mom and pop restaurant. And that has hurt a lot of people just for having a little teeny something in their pocket. They'll just make them plead guilty. And they have this record on them for the rest of their life.
Yeah, yeah. It's destroyed families. It's destroyed my family, and it really screwed me up when I found out that it was intentionally, basically introduced to our world because we were doing too well during the '60s. What I see as a historian, and I'm writing about this right now, but what I see is every time that the foundational Black American rises, we start to rise. Immigrants are used to introduce an ideology that's detrimental to our health. For instance, the Irish introduced the police force, and they introduced night riding, and to scare us out of the South because we were doing too well in the South. We were doing too well in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in Greenwood. You know, then what we have next, the Italians introducing drugs into the neighborhood. It's always something. You know what I'm saying? But so that we need to be aware of immigrants introducing poisonous ideology. When I was a little boy in the 90s, I remember music. I remember being in elementary school and people were listening to the brothers were listening to Boys to Men and dressing up in ties and stuff. And then Luke dropped some shit. I forgot the song, but it was some booty shaking shit. And I remember like overnight in a summer, the culture changed. Another introducing shit to poison us. What's this all about, y'all? I don't know. Go ahead, Fresh. Go ahead, Fresh. Can you hear me?
Hey, Fresh.
Fresh made her internet maybe down while we're waiting on Fresh. Go ahead, Kush.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Good evening to the room.
Good evening.
Y'all got me thinking. While I'm out here, I'm supposed to be winding down for the evening. Instead of playing on X Spaces, but y'all got me wrapped up with this. Three different points. So I grew up. I'm an '80s baby. '90s raised me, And so I was young in the 90s. And what I do remember as an adult now, looking back, growing up, I remember going to school with kids that were dirty. And when I say dirty, I mean literally you could see the dirt on their faces, children who smelled like urine, things like that. And you never kind of think that maybe these were children who parents was on drugs or whatever. You don't really think about all that. You just as a kid know this child next to me smell like pee. Things like that. Now the reason why I bring that up is because a lot of our parents are either late boomers or Gen Xers, and they're older now. And as Wani was saying, you know, there's this disconnect where the parents, for lack of a better word, were unable to love their children the way the children needed to be loved, to be taken care of, and provided for a way. For all intents and purposes, the children were abandoned. But now, if these parents are still alive, we're at a point where these parents are older and they need help and assistance. So, what I was thinking about is the generational effects of um, the drugs being introduced into our communities. When we talk about the bonds that were broken, yeah, the bonds may have been broken in the 80s and in the 90s, but we're 25 years into the 21st century. Sometimes children don't come back from that abandonment. And so now you have parents who are being abandoned in return for the abandonment of their children. And so sometimes you'll see over generations that the bonds that are broken is not even just biological bonds or whatever, but it's mental, it's emotional, it's psychological. And people really don't recoup the way that they need to. And so we lose certain things. And I think about that when we talk about reparations and people tracing their genealogy and stuff like that. Imagine all of the wealth of knowledge that some of us have lost because our parents and grandparents and whatever, grandparents trying to cover for their kids, parents out here on crack. Like you losing so much. So I just think about like holistically all of the things that our community have lost behind that. Um, Seventh Ward made me think about something when he was talking about how a lot of the soldiers were required to take, sometimes the military might call it the whiz quiz or whatever, got to take these P tests in order to, um, maintain your employment or whatever, or just make sure, like you said, that you're not on drugs. But one thing that I noticed is if people wasn't on drugs, people was alcoholics. And so that's what I do notice with a lot of people in the military. There are a lot of alcoholics, male and female, in the
I was
military.
one.
I'm sorry, say it again, Seven Ford.
Yes, I had a drinking problem in the military.
And again, because guess what? And I've seen this even with people that are either former military or people that are former drug addicts, they will swap addictions. So the thing is, you can be an alcoholic and still keep your job. People, hey, you just need to go to AA Anonymous. But my thing is this: if you a drug addict, it's worse than being an alcoholic. And so people just swap the addictions. And so I think sometimes too, um, we may not always see the impact of the drug use, but the alcoholism, sometimes people are swapping addictions. So that's just something that crossed my mind because it's something that I did see. um and there was something else that y'all mentioned that crossed my mind, but I forgot it right now. But yeah, like I said, this conversation just made me think about so many things that our community lost, even if we don't think about it. It's valuable tangibles that we can't get back, just like even just wealth of knowledge passed from generation to generation.
Yeah, and knowledge, knowing is half the battle. That's what they used to say on GI Joe, right? Go ahead, Fresh. What's on your mind? Can you hear me, Fresh? Okay, Fresh can't hear me, but yeah, I really, part of my life legacy is I want to make our people be aware of history. Now, nobody's degrading anybody or nobody's being xenophobic. Fuck all that. I'm an academic, boring historian that just looks at the facts. And the fact is, immigration has been the most successful attack upon Black Americans, foundational Black Americans, since the fucking 1700s. Captain Oglethorpe sent criminals. They were white English people, but they were criminals. The academic books call them debtors. The debtor colonies. They were broke, degenerate, mentally insane. Now, to our but we were kind of fortunate because Australia got the worst of them. Australia got the real maniacs. That's why there are hardly any um, um, Austronesian, Melanesian blacks in Australia. They just wiped out whole fucking places. Tasmania was wiped out. It killed every last Tasmanian. But we got it pretty bad. Once that fizzled out and we start to bounce back from them after emancipation, here come the Irish. Dr. Howard Zinn says something interesting about the Irish. He says, uh, immigrants from Ireland fleeing starvation where the potato crop failed were coming to America now packed into old sailing ships. So check this out. What I've noticed about this system is it targets immigrants who are, number one, running away from their family. Let's stop right there. If you're running away from your family looking for a new home, you cannot be trusted. Would anybody in this room trust me if I just fucking abandoned my mother and my children and my grandparents and came to this space and said, "Hey y'all, I want a new family." Fuck no, y'all wouldn't trust me because I just ran away from my goddamn family. That's common sense. So this his and now the year I'm talking about is 1844. This shit is way past old. The system looked for Irish that were starving half to death, couldn't wash up, couldn't pay for themselves, and said, "Hey Irish, come over here and police these Negroes, and I'll give you a job and give you a bar of soap." That's the fucking the system, Dr. Howard Zinn further says. How could these new Irish immigrants, themselves poor and despised, become sympathetic with the black slave who is becoming more and more the center of attention, the subject of agitation in the country? Indeed, most working class activists at this time ignored the plight of blacks. Eli Moore, New York trade union leader elected to Congress, agreed in the House of Representatives against receiving abolitionist petitions. And Dr. Zinn says racial hostility became an easy substitute for class frustration. And he's right about that. Instead of worrying about Ireland and worry about how to plant potatoes, they start focusing on the Negro. And that's the game, ladies and gentlemen. I want y'all to be aware of it. All that's happened in the last 400 fucking years is the face has changed. The game, the just like football, it's the same Hail Mary. That's all it is. But the face has changed from an Irish to an Italian. It's seemingly getting darker, if I may add, to a melanated, to an African coming over here talk.
Because
But
we advocated for them to come over.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
our fault.
yeah, we do have some. We have a lot of responsibility in that. How about we advocate for ourselves, for Christ's sake, for once? Can we please? Kush, I saw your hand for a second.
So I did have my hand up because I thought about the other point that I was thinking about. Excuse me. So I was thinking about when we were talking about immigrants and them introducing drugs and ideology into the black community, and sometimes how things can go hand in hand. And also to what Sevenfold was saying about people turning to drugs when they find themselves in a downward, place, a plight, or whatever that they feel hopeless and can't get out of. And I was thinking about the ideology of Pan Africanism and us seeing all of these decades later that while in theory Pan Africanism sounds great, we can't get any traction with Pan Africanism in application. It just does not work. But at the time that Marcus Garvey was pushing that, if I'm not mistaken, and I could have my timeline off, this was also around a time that heroin was also being pushed in the black community. And so you had people like, I think you had Noble Drew Ali, Elijah Muhammad, Marcus Garvey, all of them pushing these various ideologies of ways for black people to push themselves up. And while Elijah Muhammad was pushing for people to get off of drugs, I was just thinking, like, sometimes the drugs can mess with people's mind and that they take a hold of ideologies and not really fully think them through. And so we continue to push them over decades, and then it turns into a century, and then it's like, how do we break these cycles? So I could have my timelines off, as far as when Marcus Garvey was here and when heroin was, a big thing. But I was just thinking about the fact that sometimes when people are taking drugs, it's easier for them to also take hold of ideologies that are not beneficial to them in the long run.
Yeah, yeah, and ideologies are dangerous as hell. Feminism, um, uh, I know this isn't in the topic, but I was thinking about Shirley Chisholm's ass because I was watching, seeing some with Jasmine Crockett. She was up there advocating and making some skew ass argument, and she had a big old picture of Shirley Chisholm in the background. I said, "Uh huh, there it is." Shirley Chisholm was not one of us, and Shirley Chisholm, teachers, take a fucking picture out your classroom, please. Don't hang her up in a goddamn American classroom. Shirley Chisholm was a goddamn op. I'll say it in church, goddamn it. Shirley Chisholm was from the Caribbean, isn't that right, Wani?
Yes.
And Shirley Chisholm introduced feminism into the black community. You see, Dr. Howard Zinn and a lot of other scholars argue that black women were skeptical of feminism. They don't tell you that. And it makes sense because think about the civil rights movement. We had Fannie Lou Hamer. She was married with a husband. She loved her husband. You know what I'm saying? She talked about, but she bragged on her husband. You know what I'm saying? Black women wasn't into no feminism back then, but what you needed was a black face to come in there and vouch for feminism. So here comes Shirley Chisholm looking like one of us. It's basically telling us it's okay to be feminist. And she introduced that goddamn poison into our families and broke it up. And it sounds like I'm being spiteful. I'm not. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. I'm from a neighborhood called Smithfield. And my aunt June raised me. June died in her 80s. And she said one of the worst things that happened to Birmingham, to the black neighborhood, is the is feminism and elitism. But basically, in Birmingham, the blacks lived in one neighborhood in Birmingham called Smithfield, and the rich people lived at it's a hill. At the top of the hill were the very rich people. At the bottom was us. We were poor. We weren't all ultra poor because you had the projects right behind us, but we were down there with the projects. So what that did was create hope. So down at the bottom of the hill on Center Street, we could look up Center Street, to the top of the hill, and see the Davises, Angela Davis's family. He had a really nice, clean house. Top of the hill, you see the lawyers and the doctors and the principals, and middle of the hill, you see the school teachers and the nurses. We had a choice. We could say, I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, a businessman, or I can be a junkie. Whatever you choose, that's okay. But we had a choice. Angela Davis introduced feminism into that community and busted up a lot of families. When later I found out it wasn't allegedly it wasn't about the ideology of feminism. It's about her personal lifestyle. This shit's poison, man. It's
Yeah,
just
they love to do that. Lesbians love to talk about feminism and break everybody up, and then they go chase women, white women usually. So you have to just really steer away from that. The other thing is, white women and black women do not have anything in common in terms of our general makeup. So we don't need some of these things that they need. And I have yet to have a feminist to come up and explain, what are you doing? What is your goal? They won't talk. They won't admit that they're feminist. So I'd like for one of them to come up, tell us what their movement is about and what the goal of the movement is, because they've kind of latched their wagon onto women's rights. Yes, those were noble pursuits: voting, getting an education, and having a bank account, controlling your own money. But after that, what are these people talking about? On and on and on with this persistent movement, which is really based to pit men against women, gender division, and then it's like an entry level into LGBTQ because that's all that's in there. They've even now said that they wanted to remove lesbians from their movement. And they said, we don't have the same motives. We don't have the same philosophy. Yeah, they got caught long ago and kicked out, but they keep worming their way back into these movements. And they're similar to the way that the Caribbeans represent us, and it's a misrepresentation. They say a lot of things that women are not saying. They say, we don't like people complimenting our outfits. We don't want you to hold the door open for us. We'd rather be in a cave with a bear than a man. They say all that, and then later you go on their their sight and you see that they're lesbian. So, of course, they'd rather be in a cave with a bear. So, that being said, the feminist movement is very suspect, and very illegitimate until a feminist comes up here and articulates exactly what they're doing. It's all about septum rings, apparently.
Feminism has no femininity.
It's a weapon. I mean, we're all. I hate to keep taking it back here, but it all goes back to that German lineage. Like, what? I got to do some research. What is this about? Cocaine leading back to Germany, Germanic leader lineage. Feminism leading back to Germanic lineage. Marxism,
MK Ultra
MK Ultra, and
and then
Germanic
the
lineage.
drugs. The only the only thing that I couldn't link them to, I could link them, but that Timothy Leary was running around. He's not German. He was telling everyone to get on drugs. Tune in and tune out. Oh, really? Let's all take LSD and be out of our minds? Is that what you're advocating? Yeah, he was advocating the use of drugs. And but he was
He was a
also,
fad.
yeah, he was a lot of things. I mean, outrageous. And people's lives were destroyed because of that mess.
Oh yeah, and he destroyed. Allegedly, he destroyed his own life. But I don't know what to believe anymore. You know that the Unabomber was one of his subjects. Ted Kaczynski was affected by MK Ultra, but history says that Timothy Leary took too much LSD and went fucking mad.
Because they said if you take it more than 3 times, you're clinically insane or something like that.
I had a friend. I went to a white high school, and the white kids used to do it, and I wouldn't touch it. But they would say that it crystallizes. We're talking about LSD. Crystallizes on your spine, and they would run around and punch each other in the back. Like if you get punched in the spine hard enough, it would break off of your spine, and you start tripping. I was like, "Yep, I'm never doing that." Fresh. You back up yet, Fresh? Ladies and gentlemen, we in conclusion, this was going to be a short space. Our brother Tariq is on. In conclusion, did immigration bring drugs to the black community? Absolutely, it sure did. This a proven fact that the Italian mafia brought crack cocaine to the black community, and that crack cocaine disrupted our community. In addition, the Italian mafia brought prostitution to black communities. We will talk about that in another space. Did they bring filth to our music? Absolutely. I could go down countless name. I could list countless names. We can list Luke, and music was honorable before immigrants got involved with it. It's my opinion that this was conducted as some type of project, some type of military operation to destroy the cohesion of the black family. If you want to know more information about this, go to Our Story Publications, put $25 on the Cash App, put your full address and full name, and I'll mail your book out. If you bought a book, it's on its way. I'm mailing them out in 2 days this weekend. In addition, you'll see Nikki the God and Wani Spot's Cash App in the Jumbotron. Show them love. I enjoyed y'all. This was intended to be a short space today, and we're going to meet up on Tariq's space. Peace out. Much love, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. Wani, you had any last comments?
Good night.
All right, bye, y'all.